All right, part two of our economy. Let's talk about supply and demand. What is it we need to know about supply and demand? Well, first and foremost, as you've already discovered, you can graph this. There's math and economics. If you're a person who is into economics, you're definitely going to have a lot of graphing and math to work on. However, it's not too bad. You guys remember all your plotting skills. What do we need to understand? Well, first and foremost, usually when we're looking at a plotting for graphing stuff, we're looking on the left side at the amount of money in which we will be paying or are willing to pay for a product. And then, of course, across the bottom, you're going to be looking at the amount of product in which will be sold. Now, factories want to make the most amount of product at the highest level of pay. The problem with this is that people don't want to buy stuff that costs a lot. So, on the other hand, people want to buy the most amount of product at the least amount to pay. So, where is it that we can find a happy in between? And that is where the two coinciding lines cross one another. When we look at what people are willing to buy, as the price goes up, the amount of product in which they are willing to buy goes down, which means you have a line that starts off very high on the graph on the left side and then moves downwards towards the right side of the graph, indicating that the lower the price, the more product they are willing to buy. The higher the price, the less product they are willing to buy. And the vice versa for the factory. The factory, of course, will be less product at low prices, and of course, they want to make the most amount of product at high prices. So it ends up being basically they're making an X. Now, where that X coincides with one another, where they meet, intersect, that is referred to as the equilibrium. That is the maximum amount of product at the maximum amount of price in which people are willing to buy at that price, and the factories are willing to produce at that price. That is the sweet spot, if you will. If you're in business, that's where you want to be. You want to be in the equilibrium. You never want to go beyond that as the manufacturer, because if you go beyond that point, then what is going to happen is you're either going to end up with a surplus, that is product that you cannot sell sitting in a warehouse somewhere, and that's just money waiting to be spent. It's just sitting there. Or if you raise the price, that will cause the person to not want to buy as much product. If you lower the price, on the other hand, you may not want to make that much product, which will actually cause a shortage. Now, we talked briefly the other day about shortage can be a positive thing. It's a risky thing. You always want to stay at the equilibrium. That's the happy spot. However, you can make a false shortage. I say false because that's what Apple and other companies like that do when they tried to build up hype over a new product. But if they build up too much shortage, people will lose interest. People will discover that it's too difficult to get or too expensive to buy, and they won't buy your product, which is what has happened a few times on some of their products that didn't sell very well. Um, there was several products in which they brought out, and those products kind of were, flops. And the reason being is that they built the product up, and then the shortage was too great, and the price was too great, and basically people lost interest in the product. So it is a risky game. As a owner of a business, I would definitely want to stay in the equilibrium, making the most amount of product and understanding that that is where I need to stay because I don't want a shortage because people will lose interest, and I don't want a surplus because that's just wasted money. Okay, so supply and demand, very, very important in building a business. When looking at types of economy, we need to take a good look at the three different types of economy. Market economies, such as capitalism, and I would say that we qualify as a market economy. They definitely believe in laissez-faire. That means the government stay out of our economy. Um, we like to think of ourselves as a market economy, but there are no true market economies. The closest out there in the world is probably New Zealand. New Zealand probably has the most open market. However, it's a small country, and thus we haven't yet seen too much of a problem with that. I will say, though, it does have some restrictions on production, like weapons and selling, things like that. So even though they are closest to a market economy, they're really not. They're kind of a mixed economy. Even we are a mixed economy, and I'll talk about that. A planned economy is, well, that is like communism or socialism, where you have a government that is in control of basically all the modes of production. When communism looks really, really great from the outside, especially to undeveloped or poor countries. The reason being is that because if you have a poor country, then you have a vast population that is in the poverty level, and then probably a very, very small 1% or less that basically own everything. Communism basically is a redistributing of wealth, seizing of the wealth of the 1%, and then equally divvying it up or sharing it amongst everyone. Um, for a poor person or a person living in a third world country, communism is extremely attractive because going from nothing to something is major. So this is why you saw communism during the early 1900s rise in Russia, and then after the 1940s in China, and throughout Asia in the 1950s and 60s, as you saw North Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, all those other countries become communist. Why? Well, they were third world countries with extremely poor, large populations and were ripe for a communist takeover. Now, here's the thing. If you live in a communist country, the government owns the entire country. And you work for the government. And everybody shares equally in the benefits of the country. Now, the country tells you what and when and where to make a product, and you are expected to make those products according to the requirements by the government. However, this does allow for you to be able to own things that would have never been possible before. Suddenly your life your standard of living is improved greatly. However, it does stifle creativeness, and it does keep people held back after a while. A lot of countries that start off communist after 40, 50 years of being communist find themselves very much unhappy with communism. Why? Because once you've had a taste of the good life, you would like even better. No one likes to stay where they're at. So we always are looking for the greener pastures. And communism doesn't really allow for that. They say that they do. You work together and we move upwards together, but it's so slow that people get dissatisfied with it. And that's where you've seen communism in like Russia and other countries where communism has collapsed and fell. It's been because of that dissatisfaction factor, the greener grass problem, and the fact that communism doesn't really allow for that. I will say that China has embraced what is referred to as a planned mixed economy. China is the greatest of these mixed economies. When you talk about a true mix, Yes, it is a planned economy. It's in a communist country where the government controls everything. However, China recognized the writing on the walls in the 1990s and saw the collapse of Russia as a giant big red flag warning sign that they had to change their way of doing business. And because of that, China has allowed for people to own their own companies and their own businesses, thus allowing them to be inventive, creative, and successful. And China has decided to become silent partners with those companies. So you have a company in which you own as a private business owner with a silent partner, aka the government, and their support. And it is working out fantastic for China. For the last 20 years, China has been a juggernaut of economic expansion. That's why everything's basically made in China now. They have taken the best of the planned economy, full government support, and mixed it with the free market economy, allowing people to own their own businesses and come up with their own products. And between the two have made China extremely successful. The United States has a free market economy, but it is somewhat mixed a little bit, only a very small amount of mixed. That is because the U.S. government does step in and stop people from making products that are harmful to the country. And as you have seen with COVID-19, has stepped in and demanded some manufacturers to make products such as hand sanitizers, face masks, ventilators, these things by order of the president, basically telling companies what they can and cannot make. That would say planned economy. However, it's only in extreme emergencies where the government in the United States takes over the economy, or when it is in the national interest that a company not produce a product. So, yeah, we're a market economy. The United States is classified as a market economy, but even we have a little bit of planning economy. Planning economies generally are not successful. Planned economies are generally not successful in the long run. Communism, socialism countries generally collapse after a while because of the greener pasture problem. Those that have survived, those planned economies that have adopted some free market economy ideas, which makes them a mixed. Truly, when we look out there, every economy is a mix. It's just a question of how much planned versus how much market economy is in the mix. We are mostly market with just a touch of planned, and where China is a bunch of plan with just a touch of market. Two different extremes, if you will. So there you are, our three different types of economy. All right, free market economy, as I said, when you're looking at them, this is just another recap of that. What you are allowed to produce, what you want to produce, how and when and where you want to make it, which in America you can, to whom you want to offer it, and at what prices you want to do that. I will say that it's only through the regulations that we see that not true in the United States. Such as milk. Milk has a set price. There is a price ceiling and a price bottom. In other words, they will not sell milk for less than. That is a way to protect the farmer from going out of business. And they won't raise the price of milk too high because they're protecting the consumer, aka children, if you think about it, who drinks milk, kids. So it's a protected product. You know, for the most part, if you want to build a business, you can make a business, and you can choose where to do it and to whom you want to sell it to, and at what prices you want to sell it. For that part, in the United States, for the most part, we are a free market society. Recognize that supply and demand will determine a free market society. If I make a product that sucks, people will not want it. Also, if I make too much product, a surplus, then I will have to drop the price of the product in order to get people to buy it. And if that happens, that could cause a loss of profits. Also, If there is not enough product, the demand will go up, thus prices will go up. And if people don't like the price that it goes up to, then their interest will fall. So it is a definite balancing act. So remember, the happy spot, the middle, is where you want to be, called the equilibrium. Okay, you want to make sure that you're equal. All right, free enterprise. When looking at the free enterprise system, this is where private owners are allowed to operate a fairly free from state control. The United States does have free enterprise, where we are allowed to set goals such as freedom of efficiency, equality, security, stability, and growth. Individuals both have rights and responsibilities. This is capitalism, not communism, um, because we are in charge of the production. Now, there is, within the free enterprise system, there is that regulations that we have to follow in the United States. So, we have to think about those things. The positive things about free enterprise is you get to promote economic growth. It allows for people to be creative. You're free to start up a business or a product fairly easily without too much regulations and not too many high taxes. Um, the standard of living in our country is the highest in the world. We live at a higher level. Even the poorest of us are living better than probably 90% of the rest of the planet. It promotes individual choice. You get to choose what you want to do. If we were living in Europe or living in Asia and my dad was a construction worker, there would be a tremendous amount of pressure for me to be a construction worker. My chances of becoming a teacher would be very, very small. Why? Because the choice isn't really there. It doesn't allow for that choice. Um, the negative parts of a free enterprise, well, people with disadvantaged backgrounds, minorities, or the social inequity of the society may keep people from having equal access to the free enterprise system. It is really easy for someone who is rich to start up a business. If we could all just get a small loan from our daddies of $1 million, we could all become billionaires, maybe even president of the United States. On the other hand, you know, uh, it does take a lot to get the ideas for a business to support. Um, how do we deal with this disadvantage? Well, education is the best way. It's one of the reasons why there's so much emphasis on equal education and so much effort put into scholarships and extra help to help minority groups or disadvantaged groups to get into college to be able to succeed. It is hopefully not only to erase the achievement gap issues, but it is also to encourage them to go to college and get degrees so that they too can enjoy the free enterprise system where they'll be able to build their own companies. Uh, the other negative with free enterprise is that you see a huge gap in wealth, where you have people who are wealthy. The old saying, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Well, in free enterprise systems, that is true. We see that in America when you consider that 1% of Americans control 90% of all the money in the United States. Uh, Case in point, when you look at Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or the guy who owns Amazon, they expect that he will be the first trillionaire, the guy who owned Amazon, that in the next 6 years he will become the first trillionaire in the world. Not a billionaire, trillionaire. That means he will have over $1,000 billion. To have $1 billion means you have $1,000 million. To have $1 trillion means you have $1,000 billion. That's a lot of money. So You know, when you think about it, when you have people like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates who are in the neighborhoods of $200 billion each, these are gentlemen that, you know, not saying these countries are up for sale, but, you know, they could buy a country the size of Mexico if it was for sale. They have enough money. They could buy the entire country. Um, that is amazing that you could have so much money that you could literally buy your own country if it was for sale. Um, that is incredible. However, on the other hand, people who are poor find it more and more difficult every year to get out of that category. The only way to get out of that category is through education and hard work. It's also one of the reasons why families consistently try to help one another lift one generation higher up the social chain from the last generation. Many of us have families who were extremely poor at some point in time in our family's history, but through hard work and family support, we have managed to push the entire family slowly out of that category. So you see that happen. Recognize that also there is powerful competition. In a free market society, any company can push you out of business if they wish. Best case example of this is it would be very, very hard to compete against Walmart. Walmart normally puts businesses out of business. When a Walmart is built in a small town area, the first thing they do is lower their prices in order to drive out the competition. So mom and pops, restaurants, gas stations, um, grocery stores, convenience stores find it extremely difficult to compete against Walmart. Why? Because they are capable of dropping their prices. Matter of fact, Walmart will even drop their prices to where that store actually loses money. That means they're selling products at less than what they paid for them in order to drive competition in the area out of business. Um, it's not nice, it's not friendly, but recognize that in a free enterprise system, uh, uh, being in business, you can play dirty. It's not cool to do it, but people do it. So there you are. Anytime you see a place like Walmart or something like that come into a big store, big chain store comes into an area, they will lower their prices in order to drive out competition. And it's sometimes just crazy. Anyway, 5 reasons that competitions is good. And these are honestly by uh, the most important. First and foremost, obviously, is innovation. Free enterprise allows for you to develop new technologies, products, and to improve the customer's experience. It is amazing the things that we have available here in the United States that you just don't see anywhere else. Also, customer service. I love customer service because if you have good customer service, you will develop a loyal fan following. Um, it's like, you know, I love guitars and stuff, and I am loyal to the products. Many people are loyal to car manufacturers. My daddy was a Chevy driver, or Ford vehicles were the only ones our family ever owned, and that was it. You know, there is that because of dependability, service, connection. Um, I love going to Chick-fil-A. Why? Well, here's the honest truth. Their chicken is not any better than anywhere else. I mean, it's good, don't get me wrong, but it's a chicken sandwich. It's not the end of the world type thing. It's not like, oh my goodness, this is the greatest thing I have ever put in my mouth. Um, that being said, why do I like Chick-fil-A? Well, one of the things I like is the customer service. They thank me when I go there, and they're always nice and polite, and they're always courteous. And someone walks around, well, when you're allowed in the building, someone walks around and, you know, offers to fill up your glass with refills for you. Um, that being said, there's, you know, so much about the customer service that is so important. Complacency. you need to make sure that you're constantly innovating and bettering yourself. Not only that, but encouraging your employees to push themselves. If you make a good business and you invest in your employees, you will have less turnover, less people will quit. You'll have a better chance of them working harder and doing more professional jobs. It's just really important to have that positive work environment. But make sure that you are recognizing that you're pushing your employees to be the very best and to innovate. Understand your core market. You need to make sure that you recognize what the people in the area in which you live in need. Some businesses recently have recognized what was needed in the area. Several down in Greensboro, several breweries, because of the COVID-19, stopped making their normal products and began making hand sanitizer in order to meet the need of the community. This is important. Make sure you understand what your market needs. And if the market changes, don't be afraid to change with the market. Okay. Last but not least, education. Research and teaching and making sure that you have the very best people in the business for your business will make things awesome and great. So education is vital to your business, and make sure that you understand that. Okay. Things that are bad about free markets. Market saturation. This is when you have a company that puts out the same product at lower possible prices, and basically you can't make a profit on it. Perfect example of this was a few years ago with fidget spinners. One company came out with fidget spinners, they became the craze, and suddenly every company was making fidget spinners, and you found them everywhere. And then everywhere overnight, people suddenly decided that they were no longer cool. The market became saturated. It was no longer cool to own a fidget spinner. You went home on Friday at school, fidget spinning on the school bus, and then you came back on Monday and were spinning, and everybody was looking at you like, oh my God, that's so last week. That was because of market saturation. And also the price on the product dropped to the point that companies couldn't make any money on it. I mean, today you can find fidget spinners at the Dollar Tree in the bin and get 3 for $1. So, there you are. Anchoring. This is when you limit yourself by deciding that you're not going to change your product, that you're going to stick with what you've always done. And you basically become, well, a lot of my church members are anchored. Can't get them to change. They always say, well, we've always done it that way. Well, if you always done it that way, then why is it not working? That's because you didn't change. Products have to change. Your business has to change. You have to grow. So you have to stay creative, develop new strategies, and grow your business. And that may be abandoning a product that you felt like was the basis for your entire company. Your company's basis cannot be just the product. Your basis of your company is your loyalty to your employees, and to the business itself, and to your customers. If your customers want new products and your employees, you want to make sure that they continue to have a job, then you will change your products. Do not get caught in anchoring. Bidding wars. This is when two or more buyers, especially when looking at resources, get into a bidding war, and where one is willing to buy something at a higher price in order to keep you from owning it, or maybe the other way around, two products where you and another person are making the same product, and they lower their price in order to drive you out of business, which I already said this. Walmart does that. Walmart does bidding wars even when the businesses locally don't even know they're involved in a war. It is a war. Walmart moves into a small town area. They drop those prices in order to drive the competition out. So recognize that. Okay. Collusion. Sometimes, yeah, you've heard this word before, collusion. Yeah, collusion is when you have two parties working illegally in secret against a third party. They often use competition. deceptive or misleading or fraudulent ideas. Many of these ideas are illegal, and they do this in order to drive other companies out of business. Uh, we see this happen on occasion. It is extremely unfair, um, but it is basically tag teaming, where you have two or more companies basically trying to drive out a third competition. Also, low barrier cautions to low barriers to entry to market. We said earlier that because of free markets, you can start up free enterprise, you can start up a business fairly easy. Yeah, the government's out there actually giving away money in order trying to get people to start up their own businesses. Yay. The problem with this is that not everybody has a good business plan, and not everybody needs to build a business. Some businesses would be a bad idea. If I lived in Madison and Mayodan and wanted to open a restaurant, it would be a bad idea for me to open a Mexican restaurant. Why? Well, there's like 5 of them in the Madison and Mayodan area. I can't compete with that. It's too much. The market is saturated. So you recognize that not everybody um, has the experience or the understands how to do the fundamentals of market. Also, just recognize that not every community is going to be open to a new business that you may think is awesome. So because of that, a lot of people get involved in business and their businesses fail. On average, about 60% of all new businesses fail within the first year. That's just within the first year. And honestly, the other 40%, most of them don't make it either. So why do people do it? Well, take our president, for instance. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, has filed bankruptcy 7 times. That means he has started up a business and that business failed. The dude couldn't make money with a casino. Let that sink in for a second. He filed bankruptcy on a casino. That should blow your mind. So not even the greatest people who claim to know the art of the deal, which is the title of his book, business is a risk, venture, failure system. Now the trick here is if you fail, don't let failure stop you from trying again. Those that are millionaires or whatever you want to call them, most of them billionaires, most of them have started up other businesses in the past that failed, and they just kept at it until they found a business that did work, and that's how they became billionaires. Not everybody is like Mark Zuckerberg, comes up with a great idea first time out of the gate, and at 22 years old, while still wearing a hoodie every single day of his life, becomes a billionaire because he had a great idea the first time round. Most businesses start up, fail, start up, fail, start up, fail, and then eventually they find something that works. So recognize that there's a lot of failure in the markets, and that is because we can start them up, but it doesn't mean they're going to work, which leaves lots of people head scratching. Okay, so there you are. We're going to pick up at this point tomorrow, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. Talk to you later.